For a very long time, I have said that we need a revolution of the mind in America. And what I meant by that was not that everyone needs to become super smart geniuses, but we need to understand as conservatives, as people who are America first, who support America, who like our country, like the values of our country, and recognize our place in preserving those values as Americans, as inheritors of our country, we understand what our duty is. But I think that oftentimes social media has created this environment where the mind and the refinement of the intellect is not what is emphasized, but instead owning the lib, so to speak, or beating your opponent is what is focused on. And this has produced an entire generation of influencers and personalities who don't know how to do anything else except own the libs or beat the opposition, or in the most uncharitable way, or even this, take the lowest hanging fruit from the opposition and make it out to be everyone else, and then proceed on that basis, ignoring the entire other realm of intelligences and people that happen to be in the opposition. Unfortunately, I believe we saw this phenomenon come back to perhaps backfire against people on the right in the most recent interview that Taylor Lorenz, a Washington Post journalist, did with Chaya Raichik, I hope I'm saying that right, who is the founder of the popular Twitter account called Libs of TikTok. Now, for those of you that do not know, Libs of TikTok, their entire premise is that they're going to highlight the insanity of left-wing youth that happen to post on the website TikTok. Now, while I do think that Libs of TikTok does a great job in showing just some of the depths of depravity that happen to permeate modern society, and I have praised and defended Libs of TikTok in the past from censorship efforts, and also from Taylor Lorenz's egregious doxing of Chaya, who was anonymous until Taylor Lorenz decided to dox her and expose her to all kind of ridicule. While I have defended liberty and all that kind of stuff, I have always been careful to urge us, as consumers of political information, as Americans, to be very careful about what perception we have of our enemy. In order to defeat the enemy, you must know the enemy, and not just know your perception of the enemy, but you must know the enemy for who they are, for what they believe, and you must be able to argue their points in their shoes, and then come back to your point and advance your point as well, just as strongly as you advance theirs. Otherwise, you don't know what you're actually fighting. And so many people on the right, due to the work of Libs of TikTok and the work of other influencers, seem to believe that the left are a bunch of amoral, nihilistic teenagers that have blue hair, that have weird sexualities or weird pronouns, that scream into cameras, and that can't seem to have any kind of internal peace within their soul. It's this sort of caricature that so many people have bound their understanding to. And well, guess what? I think I understand why that's the case. It's funny to assume that. It's entertaining to watch these people, to watch the blue-haired women screech about how apparently them being fat is a social justice issue. Insanity, a train wreck, is pretty entertaining to watch. But it does absolutely nothing to refine you against the figures on that side of the aisle that are actually formidable and actually have ideas, even if their ideas are wrong. For every blue-haired screaming feminist, you have a Noam Chomsky. For every crazy teenager that thinks that Z and Zer is a pronoun or a gender or whatever, you have a Cornel West who can talk to you about the history of Kierkegaard, of Plato and Socrates in 5 minutes and teach you more than you've been taught in your whole life, most likely. For every single low-hanging fruit, there is a diamond, a jewel, waiting in the wings to get you. Now, I'll explain why I'm talking about this in a second, but let's look at this interview, because the left is taking advantage of this interview. And in my opinion, again, this is not meant to be nasty. Chaya did not do a good job here. I'm sorry. People are trying to say she did not. But I also understand that we should put this in context. Not everybody is a policy analyst. Not everyone is an uber intellectual. Not everyone is a philosopher. So we shouldn't expect that everyone is going to be able to respond to things in ways that we may have or the most ideal way. But we should expect that people who occupy a degree of influence have the intellectual tools to cut through the darkness of sophistry when it inevitably arises from the mouths of people like Taylor Lorenz and that entire world that Lorenz represents, which is the world of the establishment, which is the world of the blue-pilled narrative, the simplified worldview which kills the mind and only gives birth to nothing and perpetuates cycles of nonsense and cycles of ignorance within our political culture. So, one clip from the interview here demonstrates Chea being asked about the Uvalde shooter. Allegedly, Chea alleged that the Uvalde shooter was transgender, which wasn't the case. And Lorenz is saying, why did you say that? Why did you do that? Go.
Was the Uvalde shooter trans?
The Uvalde shooter wasn't trans.
Got it. And so, I guess knowing that you posted wrong information, you're saying it should stay up and everybody else should be allowed to keep whatever they have up as well. Is that sort of your stance? Am I accurately understanding it?
Is there a law against...
No, I'm not asking law. I'm just asking your personal sort of opinion. I'm just kind of curious because it seems like you have come after other people, such as vSphere and other critics, saying, you posted wrong information about me, take it down. I totally get that. That's your prerogative.
It's different with defaming a journalist like that. They're defaming me.
And you don't think that calling a shooter trans when they weren't trans is defaming anyone?
No.
Okay, interesting. I guess
they're knowingly lying about me.
Okay, you see what happened there? Is there a law against lying? And Chea is trying to say that her being defamed is different from her saying the Uvalde shooter was a transgender, because that's not defamation. And Chea in this clip, Chea doesn't push back or accept responsibility for the fact that she may have gotten something wrong. You see, sophists, my friends, will use any minor thing, even things that are ultimately irrelevant, against you to make you look bad. The principle of veracity, of truth, is not simply something that we can invoke, as Chea did, I'll show you in a second, in the interview, to make ourselves feel good or to be a point in an argument or to seem profound. It is something that seeps to the depths of our character and defines us not only in conversation and debate, but defines our standing in society and either gives us the moral agency and authority to take on these issues or takes it away by lack of veracity. A liar has no authority to speak on anything, but even worse than that, someone that won't commit to their own feelings as a human being has no moral authority either. So the coward and the liar have no place in discussion. I'm not calling Chea a coward or a liar. I don't think either of those things are true. I think she was being cornered by a dishonest, deceptive, foul individual whose entire goal is to paint a narrative to restrict the mind to a certain set of flawed premises that upon scrutiny turn out to be false. But I'm saying she should have been ready for this, to lay herself bare towards the altar of truth and to deal with this thing where it stood, as opposed to simply trying to do the merry-go-round effect, where you try to just go around an issue through so many ways. There's another clip. This one's more egregious. Lorenz is asking Chea, why are you so against transgenderism? And Chea's like, well, because it's false. And then Lorenz says, but what's the harm? And Chea is not able to give an answer. Go.
If you eradicate transgenderism, which I believe you suggested in a post today.
No, I never suggested that.
Oh, okay. You reposted a post that was advocating for that. What would happen to the people that have already medically, socially, completely transitioned and are leading happy lives? What would happen to them? I mean, what's your plan for that? If transgenderism doesn't exist, which it seems like that's what you believe, what happens to all the people living happy lives as trans people?
Well, first of all, the whole trans it's based on a lie. You can't change your gender.
Okay, but
so they could go live their life. I mean, I can't tell someone what to do in their house.
Sounds like you do want to tell people what to do in their house.
I never said that.
So you're totally okay with people being trans, just not as long as they're in public?
No, I never said that. They could. The whole thing is based off of a lie, and I think that this lie cannot be mainstream in our society. It's a lie.
And what harm is it causing, do you believe?
I like the truth. I like truth.
Right, but I'm saying what's the harm of people expressing their gender identity differently than you believe it to be? What harm are they causing?
Like I said, we are a nation of truth, and I seek the truth.
But I'm asking about the harm. What's the harm? You might believe it to be false, but what's the harm?
The harm is that there's a lie that is very mainstream and is being embedded into every institution.
I guess I'm wondering what the material harm is. Aside from it's maybe something that you disagree with, as in your version of the truth is different than their version of the truth. What is the material harm of them living their life as a woman or man or gender that you don't agree?
Not anything that's wrong is there a material harm necessarily.
So there's no harm.
I didn't say that.
All right, a few things here. Here's how I would have responded. Miss Lorenz, truth is not simply important because it sets a baseline of understanding for everyone in society, which allows us to talk and communicate, because without that, we wouldn't be able to communicate. But truth is also important because if you live in illusion and you live in falsehood, you can't be a moral person, nor can you actually flourish as a human being. So the ultimate harm of living in a lie, the ultimate harm of living in a falsehood is that you impact your potential as a human being, you limit yourself to your current stage in life, and you don't get as much out of life as you possibly could have. And doubly, you decrease your understanding of the world because the foundation by which we understand the world, which is the truth, is no longer important. Your own subjective feelings are important, so you will not be able to understand the distinction between your subjective perception and actual objective reality. Those are the harms. But even beyond that, Chaya was actually right. Not everything that is false has a harm. Even beyond that, let's say there are no tangible harms. It is still a moral good and a moral preference to live in accordance to truth. Because once again, without truth, there can be no common understanding. There can be no coherent action. Even if we take all the harm out of it. Because harm is not the only foundation of moral thinking, right? I always say that harm and consent are the two hallmarks of moral thinking. Well, yes, but they're very basic. Beyond that, we have to ask ourselves, if morality is a product of action, and action comes from being a human being, comes from a willful undertaking of being a human being, then it follows that how we treat ourselves as a human being is going to be quite consequential in the kinds of actions we can do. So even beyond harm, there is an auxiliary purpose for us to be able to undertake sound actions. Forget harm. Let's talk about being able to live coherently. Because if you can't live coherently, you can't live at all. Go down to San Francisco in the streets and you'll see a bunch of people that aren't living coherently. They're living on trank, that horse stuff. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at them, by the way. I'm terrible. I'm sorry. But I'm trying to illustrate a point. By the way, most of those people that are in those situations will admit to you they put themselves there. And any welfare, any money actually doesn't help them. Just a PSA. Anyway, so my point is this. My point is this. In order for us to defeat the enemies, both the low-hanging fruit and the more important enemies that can actually articulate an argument, hold a sentence, which, by the way, many leftists can do, we have to be willing to refine and sharpen our minds, not just with rhetoric, not just with owning the libs, but with a strong anchor in moral and political philosophy, sound reasoning, and the laws of logic to back us up in our argumentation. The great William F. Buckley Jr., who many people may have different opinions about, but regardless of what you think about him personally, one thing was certain. He was able to take on all kinds of people, even Noam Chomsky. He didn't do the best there, but even Noam Chomsky, and make a compelling point and articulate the conservative worldview. Because he did not necessarily care about attacking the person per se. He cared about addressing the frameworks and philosophy and the ideas under which people labor. See, it's not the person you are seeing when you see a blue-haired person on TikTok screaming about fat phobia and fat acceptance, or screaming about intersectionality or racism, or screaming about ableism, or screaming about Palestine. It's not the person. It's the idea they're laboring under. They are an emissary for a certain idea. And so you have to address what they're laboring under if you're going to deprive them of the authority they have in that conversation, and you're going to correct the record to reflect the truth. But so many people continue to confuse the local, or rather the universal with the local. They continue to say, this person right here is the avatar of everything I hate, and I can deal with them, and they will expose themselves to this lowest common denominator, but they'll never watch a lecture by Noam Chomsky, one of the smartest leftists to ever exist. They will never watch a lecture by Judith Butler. Oh no, why would we do that? They want to go see the crazy people, low-hanging fruit. It's the equivalent to this guy called Luke Beasley, who was a former David Pakman ally and is a big YouTuber now, going to these Trump rallies and getting the lowest fruit ever, lowest common denominator, these random people, and saying, what do you think about Trump? And then watching them slip up, and then posting on Twitter, here's what Trump supporters think. Oh, aren't they so stupid? It's the same phenomenon, different face, different team. Let's break the cycle. Let us break the cycle and bring back the power of reason in our conversations. I've had people in my own life tell me, Christian, you're too philosophical. You're too substantive. You're too this, you're too that. For years, people have been trying to push me against what I'm doing right now. They have been trying to tell me, Christian, you need to write at a third grade level. Christian, do this. Christian, do that. There are people who used to mentor me, who are at this moment more successful than me on YouTube. And when I see their success, I ask myself, should I have listened? But every time I see something like this, I convict myself in the truth that I should not have listened, and I will not listen, because this kind of stuff, while it may breed popularity, it doesn't breed substance. And a movement without substance, a movement without a thought leader, a movement without a philosophy is not a movement. It is a popular regression to mediocrity. And I will not be a part of the mediocriity that has swallowed whole the political discourse. I will not. And if you want me to be a part of that mediocrity, you can go buzz off somewhere, because I have no interest in hearing from you or any of your friends. This is the future of our country at stake. Now is the time for depth. Now is the time for substance, for fruit, for water, for things that will nourish the soul. Now is the time. We don't have time to fuck around, excuse my language, and play rhetorical mind games to own the libs. The libs have owned us. The institutions, the societies, the schools, everything. They have it under lock. We have to, man, we need a revolution of the mind. The greatest problem in the West is the problem of moral education. Most people can only describe their beliefs in the most primitive and basic of ways, which will be fine if you understand where those beliefs come from and how to defend them. Most folks don't understand either. That is a big problem we have to fix. I'll tell you guys a story before I go. Years ago, I'm 23 now. When I was 18, I was at a conference. And I think, 18, 19. It's a blur now. But I remember encountering a group of young communists. Like a group of like leftists. Communists or whatever, but they were leftists. And we argued. And there was a point where I felt like I was disadvantaged. Because I had been listening to Fox, I had been listening to all this red meat, I had been watching all the big influencers at the time back in 2018. Who was big back then? Like, I've been listening to all these people, Hunter Allen, I've been listening to all these people. And I thought that I had something. But in all reality, all I had was vacuous noise that I had absorbed in my soul. All I had was the talking points of the day. And after getting humiliated a few times, I asked myself, Christian, put aside your ego. But here's what actually matters. What matters is, if you were going into a debate, and on that debate rested the future of America, could you live with yourself if you only knew what you know now? The answer that I told myself was absolutely no. That's one of the reasons I began studying philosophy. That's one of the reasons I began studying the laws of logic. That's one of the reasons I began watching William F. Buckley. That's one of the reasons I began actually trying to dive into this stuff and understand what actually meant to be American, what meant to be a conservative, what natural law philosophy is, what sound reason is, what laws of logic is, the distinction between what is logically sound and logically valid. I began doing this not so I could feel better about myself, but so that when the time would come, I would not feel, it would not be about me. It would be about who would be impacted by my words and how they would be edified. I'm sorry if I'm not entertaining. But I am looking for people that want to be edified as opposed to being entertained. It's entertaining to watch TikTokers, but it's not entertaining to get your ass kicked in a debate by a sophist. Because that's all you knew was the TikTokers that were crazy. We need a revolution of the mind, my friends. There's nothing against Chea in this video. I respect her. She does good work. And not everyone is going to be a genius or whatever, and I don't expect that. I'm not even a genius in all honesty. I'm just a guy that can read. But what I do expect is that those that have influence will wield it towards the good, will wield it against the enemies of reason and civilization, and they will wield it in favor of Americanism. But in order to do that, they must understand what those things mean, and they must appreciate them on a deeper level. Right now, we don't have that. Let's fix that, my friends. Like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. Be sure to donate to me as well. I have Patreon, PayPal, all that kind of stuff. Comment section down below. My friends, study history, study philosophy, remain morally convicted, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.